Hi, this is Rob Sheen with the Source Conference, and I'm here with Nathan Cooprider today to talk about his talk for the upcoming Source Phoenix Mesa conference at the end of February. And the conference is going to be on February 28th and March 1st. And he'll actually also be doing his talk at the Source Boston conference in May. So with that, let's jump right in. So Nathan, your talk is on SDLC, SOC 2, and other four-letter words. So I've definitely heard some people utter some four-letter words when talking about these topics. So curious to hear your talk. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your talk?
So the idea here behind this talk is I've been through a number of companies here where I've gone through these kind of different compliance and regulatory issues and trying to deal with them both and primarily dealing with them not from a legal but as a developer. What does that affect? How does that affect my software development lifecycle? And I've had situations where that's been smooth and not really affected what I was doing and not gotten in the way of my productivity. And I've had times or my team's productivity, and I've had other times when it has been very disruptive and been as opposed to it's kind of decreased productivity more than I think you would expect for doing those kind of compliance issues. And so my thought is I've had a little bit of experience dealing with this now, and have seen a couple ways it's done right, done wrong, and I can also do some research on that and kind of put that together in a talk. And I thought that would be interesting to attendees at Source.
Awesome. So you mentioned, in your abstract, you were talking about how, the SDLC is an important place to do security if you're going to do it at all, and that SOC 2 can be a good compliance vehicle that can help with that. How do you prevent that from just turning into yet another checkbox? Because I think we have a lot of checkboxes already.
Well, I think that's a very good question, and definitely one that everyone who has to deal with these kind of checkbox type compliance issues has to deal with. I think a lot of that has to do with understanding the motive and understanding and communicating and educating on the motivations behind the checkboxes. If the people who are in this SDLC trying to produce product see this as just another roadblock to them actually producing the product, then it's going to become, like you said, just another checkbox. But if they understand that this is something that's designed to help them make a better product, if they understand the goal behind it, then that's going to help them to actually understand sort of the spirit of the law and not just the letter of the law.
And that's actually a really good point. One thing I've noticed over the years is my customers that are better at security tend to think of security as something they want to become rather than just a checkbox they want to meet. So that I always ask them, do you want to be compliant or do you want to be secure? Because they're not really the same thing.
Right.
So how do you actually convince developers to focus on something other than implementation features, though? Because they tend to be focused on and graded on, did you get the thing done according to spec, and did you get it done on time? How do you actually factor security into that?
Well, there's a couple of things that have to go into that. The probably the most important is getting upper level management bought in on it and having that endorsement. If they can see that this is not just someone else, if they can see that you're not the one just checking off a box on your to-do list, if you can see that it's actually important, that helps. Another thing that really helps is that if you do some planning and configuration ahead of time and think about these issues before they become acute, you can solve them before in less painful ways, and that will be less disruptive to the SDLC.
Got it. So kind of focusing on, if you do this sooner, it's going to cost you less pain than if you do it later, kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a truism for most of dealing with most software issues.
True.
Right. But that's true even here with process. Is that a lot of, like you said, a lot of software developers, software engineers, they kind of view this stuff as like outside their normal job, and so in consequence of that, it's stuff that doesn't get thought about until you absolutely have to. Like okay, we have this binary that we want to deploy. Now what? And so then something gets thrown together so they can meet a deadline, and then it gets pushed out, and then they have to live with that for the next 6 months. And then all the time, it's not the right solution. It's just what got them over the end goal, the end zone. And then they're like, this is horrible. Everything about this stinks. And then they table flip and check out.
Right. So you mentioned an important detail, which I think is really important, which is upper level management. And I've definitely seen that if you don't get executive buy-in, that doesn't matter how impassioned people are about security down in the trenches, it just isn't going to happen because ultimately at some point they're going to get pushback from usually from somebody in the middle,
Right.
that basically is graded on time to delivery and features. So how do you actually convince the upper management to not only buy in, but to make sure that the message propagates all the way down throughout the food chain?
Um, so a lot of this has to do with having clear um, empirical data to back up your arguments. That tends to help when you're discussing with people at a different abstraction layer than what you are used to doing at. So, for example, you want to talk to uh, the executives. They're going to care a lot more about how this is going to impact our sales numbers or whatnot, and it's going to care. They're going to care about like, so this is going to this number of deals need this number of checklists, and we need to deal with it now so that we can have this compliance ready in time for these deals for this quarter. In between, you're going to need to be able to figure out what the right balance is between just talking about, hey, we need this for security, otherwise we're going to have the person is vulnerable to these number of attacks, or that we're going to need to talk about it in terms of dollars and cents up at the upper levels.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely found it challenging sometimes to convince people that security needs to be kind of balanced right up there alongside, their various budget and time constraints that they might have. So have you found any like particularly useful tricks to enroll them in the idea that security at least needs to be on the same level of balancing? Like it doesn't have to be the most important thing, but it at least needs to be somewhere in the game, right?
Well, yes. I have to admit some ignorance of this because I work and have worked for the last few years in security companies, and so it tends to be something where they're aware of the security because even the upper level management we're selling it. They're kind of breathing it in and out of the importance of security because that's what we're telling our customers. I do think that the easy pitfall to go into there is to go into the realm of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and be like, hey, there's a risk, and talk about it in terms of all these things that could happen, and be very abstract about that, or say, hey, look, this happened to these people. It has to be much more, like I said, concrete, and it has to be more. But you still have to be empirical and be like, hey, these deals require this compliance. This compliance, the way it's going to get rolled out is if we understand the purpose of the actual compliance. The purpose of the compliance is to get security. Let's make sure we have the security.
Right. I've definitely found when trying to shift mindsets around security, like it's easy to call it FUD 'cause that tends to have a negative connotation, but I have definitely found some amount of real world conversation about what really happens does actually help. And if you can kind of factor in, maybe even do a little demo of something they've not seen before, that can sometimes help too. So just for whatever that's worth.
No, I agree. It's just, and I think you're right in making that clarification. It's just we just don't want to make sure that I would be hesitant to make that be your only source.
Correct. Right. If you're only going with FUD, and then somebody basically disproves your FUD, then your whole argument collapses. So it can't just be foundationed on FUD. It has to. But I think that a little bit of it sprinkled in it's amazing how many people I've seen still have never actually seen SQL injection and don't actually realize how it could be used if it really goes bad. For example, and and that's just one of thousands of issues, but the lack of awareness outside of our echo chamber is dramatic.
Well, and I would like if you can make it applicable to your business, like show how a SQL injection could affect your particular business, not like talk about how it hits Sony or whatever.
Right.
Or yeah, so
Yeah, tailoring it to their exact world is a good idea. So just shifting focus, one last question. So generally speaking, what maybe a couple examples of things that within the SDLC you might have seen where people can shift security to a more proactive model instead of always being reactive all the time?
um, two places that we found really that we found both some immediate impact when we implemented them. One is with the level and type of code reviewing that we do on our software. In addition, like sometimes code reviews can mean a lot of different things, and there's different levels of code review that you want for different types of software. But in general, getting at least an extra set of eyes on there with looking for those security issues can catch a lot of those things early, before they would get down, before they're released into the wild or wherever else. Another um, another huge area of a huge area of win for investment is with various types of automated testing, such as doing fuzz testing, or yeah, and that's another area that I've seen a lot of bugs that have previously been escaped bugs have been caught through both those methods.
Cool. That's awesome. So, all right, great. So I look forward to continuing the conversation with you at both the Source Phoenix Mesa conference on February 28th and March 1st, as well as the Source Boston conference coming up in the first week in May. And those of you that want to continue the conversation, come join us at one of those events, and we'll get to talk to Nathan and continue the conversation. Thanks.
That sounds great.
Awesome.